a sweet little girl, a trusted Sunday school teacher, and a crime so horrifying, it shattered a community's faith in the people closest to them. This is the tragic story of Sandra Cantu and her killer, Melissa Huckaby. March 27, 2009. Tracy, California. 8-year-old Sandra Cantu was last seen skipping home in her quiet mobile home park after visiting a friend's house. She never made it back. Her family, neighbors, and local police searched day and night, clinging to hope. 10 days later, that hope turned into horror. A farmer found a small suitcase floating in an irrigation pond. Inside was Sandra's body, stuffed, beaten, and lifeless. At first, police looked at strangers, predators, anyone lurking near the trailer park. But the truth was far more chilling. Sandra's killer was one of their own, Melissa Huckaby, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher, neighbor, and mother of Sandra's playmate. Melissa had even joined the search parties and spoke with reporters, crying about Sandra's disappearance. But her story kept changing. She told police she found a note that read, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase thrown in water." It was her handwriting. Investigators discovered Melissa lured Sandra into her trailer, gave her prescription drugs to sedate her, sexually assaulted her with a foreign object, then suffocated her. She then stuffed Sandra's small body into her own black suitcase and dumped it in an irrigation pond like trash. The community was shattered. How could a mother, a Sunday school teacher, commit something so monstrous? In court, Melissa Huckaby pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping to avoid the death penalty. She offered no real explanation for her crime. To this day, her motive remains a disturbing mystery. Was it jealousy, mental illness, or something even darker? She is serving life without the possibility of parole, forever marked as one of the most unexpected child murderers in modern true crime. Dana Rivers was once a high school teacher in California who gained national fame in the late 1990s when she was fired for coming out as transgender. She sued the school district, won a settlement, and became a vocal advocate for LGBTQ+ rights. But behind the headlines, few could imagine that Rivers would one day make news again, not as an activist, but as a murderer. Charlotte, Nikki Reed and her wife, Patricia Wright, were well known in Oakland's queer community. Nikki helped found the Deviants, an all-women biker club that Rivers was once involved in. Their son, Benny Wright, was just 19, a college student with his whole future ahead of him. In November 2016, their lives ended in one brutal night of betrayal and bloodshed. On November 11, 2016, neighbors heard gunshots and screams coming from the Reed-Wright home. Police arrived to find Patricia and Nikki shot and stabbed multiple times. Benny Wright was found shot dead in his bedroom. Their house was on fire, an attempt to destroy the evidence. Outside the home, police found Dana Rivers, covered in blood, carrying knives, ammunition, and smelling of gasoline. She confessed to killing them, but offered no clear explanation. Investigators believe the murders were linked to the Deviants. Dana Rivers had reportedly been forced out of the group due to conflicts with Nikki Reed. Some say Rivers saw Nikki as a rival or a threat. Why she chose to murder not just Nikki, but also her wife and their son, remains one of the darkest unanswered questions of this case. In November 2022, Dana Rivers was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. A once promising teacher, a voice for equal rights, now condemned for a brutal, senseless triple murder. Amy Hebert seemed like an ordinary mom living in the quiet town of Matthews, Louisiana. But behind her front door, bitterness and obsession were growing. After a painful divorce, Amy's ex-husband, Jerry Hebert, quickly remarried and gained custody of their children, 9-year-old Braxton and 4-year-old Camille. To her neighbors, Amy seemed withdrawn but devoted to her kids. Inside her mind, though, rage and despair were boiling over. She couldn't stand losing control, and she blamed her ex for everything. On August 20, 2007, Amy Hebert made a choice that would destroy her family forever. While her 2 children were sleeping peacefully in their beds, Amy took a kitchen knife and stabbed them repeatedly. She stabbed her son Braxton over 50 times and her daughter Camille more than 30 times. She also killed the family's dog. After the murders, Amy tried to kill herself. She took pills and slit her own wrists, but when police arrived for a welfare check, she was still alive, surrounded by the unimaginable scene she had created. On the kitchen table, police found a handwritten letter. In it, Amy blamed Jerry for destroying the family. She wrote that if she couldn't have her children, no one could, a chilling echo of family annihilators who use children as pawns for revenge. Amy Hebert's defense argued she was deeply depressed and suffering from mental illness. Prosecutors argued she knew exactly what she was doing and planned the murders as the ultimate act of revenge. The jury agreed with the prosecution. In 2009, Amy Hebert was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. She will never walk free again. In 2001, Barb Opel seemed like a helpful single mom just trying to get by. She worked as a live-in housekeeper and caregiver for 64-year-old Jerry Hyman in Everett, Washington. Jerry was a kind man with money Barb wanted. But instead of stealing it quietly, Barb came up with something darker. She decided to have Jerry killed. And her hit squad? A pack of impressionable teenagers, led by her own 13-year-old daughter. Barb promised the teens money if they helped her murder Jerry. Some would get $200, some $1,000. They were kids, they believed her lies. Barb convinced them that Jerry was a bad man who deserved to die. On April 13, 2001, the plan unfolded. Barb's daughter and 5 other teens snuck into Jerry's home. They ambushed him, beating him with baseball bats and stabbing him. They then dumped his body in a shallow grave behind a baseball field. The amount Barb stole? Just $40,000. She ruined 6 young lives and ended an innocent man's life for chump change. Barb's daughter, Heather Opel, was only 13 years old. Alongside her were her teenage friends. The oldest was 18, the youngest just 14. Some kids later testified they were terrified of Barb. She threatened them, manipulated them, and promised rewards she never intended to pay. One of the teens bragged about the killing at school, and that's how police cracked the case wide open. Barb tried to play dumb, claiming she didn't plan anything. But the evidence told a different story. The kids testified that Barb drove them to buy weapons, gave them instructions, and even helped clean up afterward. Barb Opel was convicted of aggravated first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Her daughter, Heather, was also convicted and sentenced to 22 years. The other teens received various sentences depending on their roles: a bitter custody battle, a respectable family turned conspirators, and a murder so cold-blooded it shocked an entire neighborhood. This is the chilling story of Kathleen Dorsett, the teacher who plotted to kill her ex-husband and his mother. On the surface, Kathleen Dorsett looked like the picture of suburban respectability. She was a former elementary school teacher from Ocean Township, New Jersey. Her parents, Thomas and Leslie, were well known in the local community. But behind closed doors, the Dorsett family was consumed by rage and bitterness. The target of that rage? Kathleen's ex-husband, Stephen Moore, and later, his mother. Kathleen and Stephen Moore's marriage had fallen apart, but their war didn't end with the divorce. They fought constantly over custody of their 20-month-old daughter. Stephen wanted shared custody. Kathleen and her parents wanted him out of the picture forever. And in August 2010, they decided to make that happen, permanently. On August 16, 2010, Kathleen lured Stephen to her parents' home under the guise of dropping off their daughter. There, her father, Thomas Dorsett, attacked Stephen in the backyard, beating him to death. Together, they stuffed his body into the trunk of his own car. Hours later, they drove the car to a remote street in Long Branch, New Jersey, and set it on fire, hoping the flames would destroy the evidence. At first, Kathleen tried to play the grieving ex-wife, claiming she had no idea what happened. But investigators quickly connected the dots. Phone records, surveillance footage, and Kathleen's own contradictions exposed the plan. As police closed in, Kathleen and her mother, Leslie Dorsett, came up with another horrifying plan. They would hire a hitman to murder Stephen's mother, Evelyn Moore, who was seeking custody of the child after her son's murder. But this time, the plot was discovered before they could strike again. In 2011, Kathleen Dorsett pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and child endangerment. She was sentenced to life in prison. Her father, Thomas, received 30 years for the murder. Her mother, Leslie, received 7 years for her role in the murder-for-hire plot.